I've been trying to figure out how to explain this for a while now. I've written it out a few times, deleted it, started over. Because every time I get to the end, to the part where I have to say what I actually saw, it sounds insane. It sounds like something a person makes up, but I'm not making it up. And I think if I'm being honest with myself, that's exactly why I need to say it out loud. I work late. That's just the shape my life has taken. I'm in the city most nights until 10, sometimes 11, and by the time I'm locking up my office and walking to the station, the platform is mostly empty. Just me and whoever else missed the last reasonable train. The line I take runs local, stops every few minutes, quiet neighborhoods, not much to look at. I know the schedule by heart. The 10:42, the 11:09, the 11:44. After that, there's a long gap, and if you miss the 11:44, you're either waiting 40 minutes or you're getting a car. I've missed it a few times. Done both. It's fine. What I'm about to tell you started on a Tuesday in late November. I'd missed the 11:44. I remember because I checked my phone as I came down the stairs and saw I had 3 minutes. And I actually jogged a little, which I don't normally do. And when I hit the platform, it was pulling away. I stood there watching the red lights disappear into the tunnel, and I thought, fine, I'll wait. So I sat down on the bench at the far end of the platform, the end no one really uses, away from the exit. And I scrolled through my phone, and I waited. I expected the next train to show at 12:28. That's the scheduled one. At 12:17, a train came. I looked up from my phone because I heard it. The low vibration in the rails first, then the sound coming out of the tunnel mouth, that specific rush of displaced air. I assumed I'd miscalculated somehow. Maybe I was thinking of a different night, different schedule. I put my phone away and stood up. The train came into the station and slowed to a stop. It looked normal. That's the thing I have to keep saying because it did. Standard cars, same aged silver exterior, same fluorescent light spilling out the windows. I walked toward the nearest door. It opened, I got on, and I went home. That was it. That was the first time. I didn't think about it again for a few days. Then I missed the 11:44 again. This happened more often than I'd like to admit. And I was back on that bench at the far end of the platform, and at 12:17, there it was again. This time I paid more attention. The car I got into had about 15 people in it, maybe 16, which surprised me honestly, because at that hour, at that stop, I'd never seen more than 3 or 4 people on a train. I stood near the door for a moment and looked around. They were all seated, all of them facing forward. Nobody on their phone, nobody reading, just sitting, hands in laps, or resting at their sides, looking at nothing in particular. I found a seat, sat down, and told myself they were tired. Late shift workers, people who'd had a long night. I've been on trains with quiet passengers before. It happens. But I noticed one thing. Nobody was moving. Not in the restless way people move. Not shifting weight. Not crossing and uncrossing legs. Not glancing at the doors at each stop. They were completely still. The kind of still that takes effort to maintain, except it didn't look effortful. It looked effortless. Natural almost. Like they'd been sitting there a very long time. The train made its stops. The doors opened and closed. Nobody got off. I got off at my stop. I walked home. I didn't sleep well, but I told myself it was just a late train, and I was overtired and making something out of nothing. The third time was about a week later. I was on the platform again. I know. And this time I wasn't sitting at the bench. I was standing near the edge, just watching. And when the 12:17 came in, I watched it from the outside for a moment before I got on. Through the windows, I could see them. The passengers. Same number as before, more or less. Same seats, same posture, same people. I don't mean people who looked similar. I mean I recognized them. The woman in the gray coat near the front. The man in the dark jacket 2 seats behind her. The younger person by the window on the right side, 3rd car back. I'd seen them the week before. In those same positions. I got on. I sat in the same seat I'd taken last time. Out of some instinct I didn't fully understand. And I watched them the way you watch something you're not sure is real. Carefully. Without wanting to be caught doing it. For the whole ride, not one of them moved. Not one of them made a sound. The recorded announcements played at each stop. Same voice, same flat tone, and not a single person reacted. Not a turn of the head, not a blink. When the doors opened, nobody looked up. When the doors closed, nobody shifted. I got off at my stop. I sat on the curb outside the station for a while before I walked home. Here is where I should have stopped. I know that. Any reasonable accounting of what I'm about to tell you has to include the fact that I chose several times to continue, to go back, to get on that train again. I'm not sure I can explain why. Curiosity is part of it, but it was more than that. It didn't feel like a choice in the moment. It felt like something I was already in the middle of. There was something almost hypnotic about it. The regularity, the sameness, like the train was there every night at 12:17 without fail, and the world just didn't notice. And I think some part of me wanted to be the one who noticed. So I started going back intentionally. I'd leave work, take the 11:44 most nights, but every few days I'd linger, sit on that bench, wait. And every time, at 12:17, there it was. I started keeping a small notebook in my jacket pocket. I wrote down what I observed, how many passengers, which cars they were in, whether anything changed between rides. Almost nothing changed. Almost. The first anomaly, the first real one, happened on what I think was my 7th or 8th ride. I was in the 3rd car, middle of the train. The woman in the gray coat was 6 rows ahead of me. She hadn't moved. She never moved. I had started to think of her as a fixed point, like a landmark, something to orient by. And then, very slowly, she tilted her head. Not much. Maybe 15 degrees, a slight lean to the right. It took me a second to process what I was seeing because nothing else changed. Her hands stayed still. Her shoulders didn't shift. Just the head. Just that small incremental tilt. Like something had adjusted her. I looked away. Looked back. She was still tilted. At the next stop, I nearly got off. I was standing at the door, hand near the rail, watching the platform through the glass. The doors opened. I felt the air from outside. I didn't move. The doors closed. I don't know why I didn't get off. It felt, and I know how this sounds, it felt like it wasn't time yet. Like I hadn't finished something, like leaving would have been wrong somehow. I rode to my stop, got off, walked home. That night I wrote in my notebook for a long time. The next few rides, I pushed myself to pay more attention to the stops. We'd pull into a station. Doors would open. The platform would be there, lit, empty, or nearly empty. The announcement would play, and nobody would move. One night I counted. 9 stops between the station I boarded and mine. 9 doors, open doors close. Not one passenger stood up. Not one approached the exit. They just sat there, for the entire length of the line, as if the stops were happening to someone else. I started paying attention to the platforms themselves. They looked right. Mostly. Same signage, same tile work, same long yellow safety stripe at the edge. But there was something I kept noticing and couldn't quite name. A sameness to them. Not just the usual institutional sameness of subway stations. This was something else. A quality to the light. A stillness on the platforms, even when there were 1 or 2 people waiting. Like they were waiting without expectation. Like they'd forgotten what they were waiting for, and the announcements. The voice is always the same on these trains. Recorded, flat, female. Calls out the stations. Reminds you to watch the closing doors. Standard. But on the 12:17, the timing was slightly off. Not wrong exactly, just the gap between the chime and the spoken words was a half second longer than it should have been every single time. And once, on a night when I was very tired and very quiet, I could have sworn the station name it called out wasn't the station we were in. I wrote it down. Checked it against my notes from the next ride. Couldn't be sure. There's a window effect on these trains, late at night, that you've probably noticed if you've taken a subway alone after midnight. The windows become mirrors. The car is lit, and the tunnel outside is dark. And you get a perfect reflection of the interior, yourself included. I started watching my reflection the way I watch the passengers. Something to look at that wasn't them directly. But one night, and this was maybe my 11th or 12th ride, I caught something in the glass that stopped me. In the reflection, I could see the car behind me, a portion of it, distorted by the angle and the curve of the train. And in that distorted reflection, I saw a man I recognized from the second car looking directly at where I would be, looking directly at my reflection. I turned around. He was facing forward, hands still, looking at nothing. I turned back to the window. In the reflection, he was looking at me. I spent the rest of that ride staring at the floor. I told myself I was done. I went home and made that decision with the clarity of someone who has just genuinely frightened themselves. Done. No more late nights, no more missed trains, no more 12:17. I kept that up for about 8 days. Then I worked late on a Thursday, and it was already 12:09 by the time I got to the platform, and I thought, I can just wait for the 12:28. I'll wait for the scheduled train. I'll stand at the other end of the platform. I won't get on. At 12:17, the train came. I didn't move from my spot, but then the doors opened and the car right in front of me was the third car, which was the car I always sat in, and my seat was right there, empty, and I got on. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. I got on. Something was different that night. I noticed it within the first minute. The air in the car felt heavier, not temperature, not humidity, just a quality of stillness that I hadn't felt as strongly before, like the car was holding its breath. And there were more passengers than usual. I counted as we pulled out of the station. 23. Before there had been 15, 16 at most. 23 people, packed tightly into the seats, all of them still, all of them silent. I was the only one standing. The train moved. Stops came and went. The announcements played. I stood near the middle of the car and tried not to look at anyone. We were maybe 5 stops from mine when I started to feel it. It's hard to describe. A kind of pressure. Not physical. More like the feeling of being watched, except intensified to a point where it becomes almost sound. A hum behind the eyes. I looked at my phone. I needed to look at something familiar. The time on my phone said 1:54. I had boarded at 12:17. My stop was 20 minutes away, maybe 25. It was 1:54. And I knew with complete certainty that it hadn't taken that long to get there. I stared at my phone for a long time. I thought maybe the battery had done something strange, or I'd lost track of time, or I don't know. I checked the date. Same day, Thursday. But an hour and a half had passed that I couldn't account for. I looked up from my phone, and out the window we were above ground now, which I hadn't noticed. We'd come up somewhere and the city was there. The city looked wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. Not ruined or altered in some obvious way. Just slightly wrong. The spacing of the lights was off. The skyline wasn't quite the shape I knew. There was a gap where a building should have been. And a building where I was certain there had always been nothing. I told myself I was on the wrong line. I'd gotten confused. These were neighborhoods I didn't know. I pressed the call button to speak to the operator. Nothing, not even a tone. I walked to the door at the end of the car. There was no next car. There was a door. And through the small window in the door, there was the connector space, the usual rattling metal walkway between cars. But beyond it, the next car was dark. Not a single light. And in that darkness, I couldn't make out any shapes at all. Not seats, not passengers, nothing. It wasn't just unlit. It looked empty, like there was nothing there to light. I turned back around. I don't know exactly when I understood. It came slowly, the way understanding sometimes does when you've been refusing to let it arrive. A loosening, a giving way. I had been watching them for weeks, watching and noting and writing in my little notebook, feeling like someone who had noticed something, someone who was paying attention. But they had been on this train before I ever got on it. And they were still on it. And they were always in the same seats. I stood in the middle of the aisle and I thought about all the stops where no one had gotten off. All the doors that had opened onto platforms where no one waited and closed again, and the train moved on. I thought about the woman in the gray coat, the man in the dark jacket. 23 people sitting perfectly still in a train that didn't exist, on any schedule, on a line that wasn't running, at stops that may or may not have been where they were supposed to be. I thought about my reflection. I thought about the feeling of not getting off, of it not being time, of something unfinished. And I thought, they've been waiting, not for the train to move, not for their stop. They'd been waiting for me to understand what they already knew. I looked at the woman in the gray coat, and she looked back at me. Not with any sudden movement, not turning, not flinching. She was simply facing me, entirely still as she always was, hands in her lap, but facing me, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. I looked at the man in the dark jacket. He was looking at me, closer than he should have been. I looked at the person by the window, looking at me. I turned slowly and looked at every face in that car. Every single one of them was watching me, still, silent, hands folded or resting. All 23 of them. Not one turned away, not one blinked, not one shifted in their seat. They were all looking directly at me. It hadn't happened gradually. They hadn't turned one by one, hadn't stirred out of stillness. They were simply already looking, like they had been the entire time. As if they had been looking for the entire ride, for every ride, for as long as I had been coming back, and I just now looked up long enough to see it. The train slowed. The announcement played. That same flat voice, that same half-second pause before the station name, and the doors opened. I could see the platform, my station. The same white tile, the same green signage, the same yellow line at the edge, everything where it should be. I looked out at it for a long moment. Then I looked back at the car, at all of them, watching, waiting, still. I stepped off the train. The doors closed behind me. The 12:17 pulled out of the station and was gone. I haven't taken a late train since. I leave work earlier now. I've started driving when I have to stay past 10. I've thought about it every day since then. What they were waiting for, whether it was just for me to see them, whether seeing them meant something I still don't understand. Whether the next step was something I avoided by getting off when I did, or whether there is no next step, and this is just it, a thing that happened. I still have my notebook. I don't open it much. There's one thing I keep coming back to, though, something I can't quite let go of. When I stepped onto the platform that last night, and the doors closed, and I stood there watching the train disappear. I was the only one who got off. I'm still not sure what that means, but I think they knew I would. I think they were counting on it. I think they needed me to.